And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
There we go. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. Well, actually, no longer Shaping Success, but I'm hoping to have the new thing all squared away by the new year because we're getting close. Might be sooner than that, but I got to go through and do a bunch of stuff that I haven't done in a very long time, so we'll get that figured out. But this is two nobodies who know nothing, myself and Robert Watson. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, but you can still support the show if you head over to patreon.com/Wes Tankersley. That will give you the ability for as little as $3 a month to help us out with that. Free ways to support, go ahead and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, drop some messages, subscribe on YouTube. Really helps to grow the show, helps us get out there, and that's the whole goal, is to reach as many people as we possibly can. So we've got some great people hang out with us every single week. But share the show, help us get there. Robert, what is happening?
Absolutely. Another week, which is always entertaining. I thought we should talk about negativity bias, right? That's the phenomenon where we are more biased to be negative than we are positive. Kind of a evolutionary thing to be able to survive in the wild. We had to be more cautious than we were adventurous. And that carried forward in life. And we know that because most of the time in media, what do we see? We don't see positive, we see negative.
Yep.
We see fiction where we should see truth. And it's just this kind of idea that everything's shaped that way, because I was looking at a couple new history books are out, and they were basically, it was all negative. It was all the bad. And I was thinking to myself, now hold on a second. The world's not completely bad. It's not horrible. And it even reminded me of the two nobodies who know nothing, right?
Right.
Which for humor standpoint, I'm going to have fun with that, because when we put it out, we should put next to our names all of our degrees.
Yep.
Okay, because we know absolutely nothing, right? And we have no experience. So the question is why are we so negative? And then the second question is what does it take to become somebody? We know what a nobody is, but what's a somebody? Why somebody get on a podcast and just comment and call two people, nobodies who know nothing? Why the negativity? Where's that come from?
Yeah, and it's funny to me because I was thinking about that. It's like how this name came about. The hilarity of the whole scenario is we've basically made this person, I can't even remember where the comment was and what the video was on, but it works. It fits, it hits. And thank you to whoever called us that. But, there's two sides of that whole thing too. And we're not saying that we're the smartest people in the world, but the reality is that it's not, to me, it's not the degrees that make us smart, right? It's the experience that we've gained from doing that. Now, I wouldn't know what I know without working in the public sector for my whole life, because that's the thing. I'm sitting down talking to my cousin a couple weeks ago and just telling her all these things about my life, and it's funny because it's not just those 2 degrees, because that's a portion of my life. I don't even use them, but the life experiences that same with you. You didn't have, I don't know if I guess I've never asked you this, but you didn't have a degree before you went into the military, I don't believe, or you had a degree, but that's not where you got the life experience. The going out every single day. People ask me how I'm such a good salesman, how I close so many deals. It's really relating life in general to what's going on and figuring out how we can create a scenario with someone who, you don't know, how you can relate that, how you can figure out what they need and help them with that.
Absolutely. And again, no, I didn't have a degree when I first joined the military. And I think the funny part, the reason why I was bringing up the degree part, was we were talking about education that day.
Yeah.
And he was commenting about us being nobodies who knew nothing about education. You've taught for a decade. I taught continuing education in college. And I'm like, hold on a second. That is actually one thing we do know something about. I mean, by anybody's objective measure, we actually do. But that was back to the idea of you have to be negative, so you're going to throw stones, number one. Number two, what do you require of us to be somebody's? I mean, is a decade of teaching enough, or do you need 3 decades of teaching? And what is the objective measure to say, hey, you know Think about education.
Yeah, well, and it's hilarious too because if you think about it, the fact of the matter is like the majority of these pundits, these people who are working for these news media outlets and things like that, they have no anything. Like they've just talked. Like they're just someone who has said something, and I get more real information from someone like Joe Rogan than I do from freaking, I don't know. I don't even watch the mainstream media because it's so biased and so fake. But what they're doing is they're feeding them these stories of reality. And we sit there, I was thinking about this the other day, and I think we talked about it before, but like this No Kings stuff, right, that's going on in this country. Oh, we're going to have a No Kings rally today. And in Idaho, they had a No Kings rally, which is hilarious to me because it's mostly red leaning or, right leaning, but there are a bunch of left leaning people here too. And not only do they just say that it's like mostly no left people at the No Kings rally, but it's really everyone. It's not just that, but the amount of people that showed up. This was a huge rally at the state capitol. 2,000 people were here. Well, there's well over 2 million people in Idaho. So the reality of the size of that rally was big. It's not. It was very small. It was a very minuscule amount of people from the state of Idaho that were at this rally. So, but the media tells you it's this huge, giant thing that it really isn't. I mean, there's more people sitting at a Boise State football game than there is at this rally.
Yeah, there's a lot more people at a Boise State football game. But that's back to the idea of this concept of expertise and somebody, and what constitutes an informed opinion, right? Do you just get to do whatever you want to with linguistics and just say, it's huge, it's big, it's amazing? I mean, what objective standard? If you go into a room and and you're going to go give a lecture or whatever, and the room is absolutely full and there's people standing in the back, you would consider, and this is me, that was well attended, meaning there were a lot of people there. But if you get into a room and there's a smattering of people in there, you have to be honest with yourself and say, even though you may give a great lecture, there was only a handful of people there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, you think about it like, and we talk about it on a small level or a big level, like the reality is like this podcast, right? We reach quite a few people. I know that because I see it, but the amount that we really reach is not that big. It's kind of minuscule. So you're sitting in a room where you reach 10 people. That's 10 more people than you reached before, but it's still not that many. So it's still 10 people, but it's a lot more than what you would normally be in front of, but it's not a lot.
Right. And I did look at, just so happens I'm doing some research because obviously I'm finishing a strategic communications master's. And so just so happened that our sourcing, because we're switching a lot of the way we look at the way people in parties persuade people, is not necessarily in mainstream media, because people aren't really subscribing to mainstream media or looking at it. So we're looking at things like podcasts, and it has amazing penetration, right? Like the Joe Rogan podcast has this last election, there was an amazing impact to the podcast. So, media is changing, and consequently there's new voices and new opportunities. The question for you is what is a is it 5 million? Is it 10 million views? Do we measure how long they actually sit? I mean, Joe Rogan's podcasts are how long?
Yeah. Oh, they're
that's several hours.
Yep. The funny thing is I found myself, and I don't listen to his podcast every episode, but like there's certain things that, like Adam Carolla was on the other day, and we all know that I love Adam Carolla. I think he's just a person who says what he sees and speaks out and isn't afraid to really be canceled or whatever. But so I listen to it, right? And he's on Joe Rogan, and I literally listen to those 3 hours, no problem. But then there's times where there's someone on there that you don't even want to listen to, and so I just I go back and forth. But in the election, like you said, it played a big part of a lot of people who listen to Joe Rogan way more than listen to the mainstream media, because you look at like the Jimmy Kimmel situation where they're talking about how many people are watching, and it's like under 100,000 people are watching this show that's nationally televised. It's a huge deal. And you get way more people listening to the Joe Rogan podcast interview with Donald Trump. And then you get people who like if Kamala Harris would have went on there, she might have had there's two things that could happen, right? She could have got exposed more, like Donald did, and got her views out there more, or she could have just really stepped on herself and ruined the whole scenario. So it's a big thing.
Yeah, what we were doing in the research is the professor had asked us to justify our choice to analyze a podcast. In other words, why were we New York Times? Why were we not looking at some other? The justification was, in other words, she wasn't questioning us. She was just saying, make sure in your research you explain your justification for using this particular podcast, which in this case was the number 5 ranked podcast in the country. So number one, it's ranked in the top 5. Number 2 is it's the number 1 political podcast in the country. And it deals with is only politics. That Joe Rogan won't lean into politics, but he does a bunch of other things. And so that's part of the justification. And as I started looking at the data and I started looking at the research, I was going, oh my gosh, this is really, really powerful in the impact on what it does to, for example, like if you're a political communication and you're trying to address, and you're left leaning, you're trying to address the Democratic Party. Well, this podcast has an amazing impact on what people who are registered as Democrats see, hear, and feel. That's huge.
Yeah.
You want to pay attention to what they say because it's having a lot more impact than, say, an old-timey Face the Nation type show. When Face the Nation was on, it was the biggest thing out there, right?
Yep.
But remember where you were. There were no other choices. Now there are tons and tons of choices, yet these podcasts are really doing an amazing job of dominating the ecosystem, the media ecosystem.
Well, it's another thing. It's like we talked about, like Wikipedia being a source, right? Like we talk about how is this a reliable source? Well, it's kind of weird. You have to vet everything the same way, but I think what's going on is we're getting the real voice of the people when you sit down with someone and you can actually hear someone who's been through it, who's been in the trenches, who talk about it, who know what's going on. Because a lot of times the mainstream media, they have no clue what life in the real world is like. They don't understand that, you have to go out and work every day. I keep seeing this guy on TikTok talking about a livable wage in Idaho, and it's insane to me to see. But he's going through, he's using this specific score, and I'll have to look into it and see what it is and talk about it a little bit more. But he's using a specific score that talks about how much money you need to make to survive and live in the state due to inflation, due to what the average wage is, due to what things cost in that area. And he's talking about a person who was making like $20-something an hour, which averaged out to somewhere around what a teacher made in this state, and that they're living in a $65,000 a year deficit. And how do they make up that deficit? Through credit cards, through loans, through things like that. And so they're living a life in debt that they'll never get out of because of the amount of money that they make. And it was based on this lady who was working like at a gas station, making like $20 an hour, I think, and has 2 kids, is what he could figure out all this stuff based on what she's talking about, how much your rent is, how much your house payment is, those types of things, and how are you surviving. And it's just crazy because I was talking to my dad the other day, and we're sitting there talking about what his starting wage was when he was a kid, and it was like $2 an hour. You can't live on that anymore. You can't live on the minimum wage in Idaho, I think, is $10 or not. It's not even $10 an hour. I think it's $7.25. I think it's the national national wage, which is not very much. I think it's like $7.25 or something like that, which, when you're a kid, you're starting out and you're making that type of money, but now you're not. But these people who are in the media have no clue because they've never made that amount of money. They're sitting there on their, soapbox telling you what you should believe. And 90% of what they're saying is lies because they don't do their job anymore. They don't have an objective view. They're just talking about the good side or the bad side of whatever side they're on.
Yeah, one of the challenges that I saw is when you get your media out of a major media center like New York or LA, as an example, let's just pick New York.
Yeah.
How realistic is New York compared to Idaho? Boise, for example. In other words, is that Is the standard of living? Is education? What does that feel like? What are the taxes like? Is that even reasonable to assess? And it's very difficult sometimes, especially when you're in a large metropolitan area like New York. Very hard to understand what somebody is doing in Austin, Texas, for example, or Boise, Idaho, or Des Moines. And there is a bit of a disconnect, and that is just a reality of your location, just in simple terms.
Yeah, and you think about it, like the other thing that they're talking about too is like this redistricting stuff. I think you're dealing with that in Texas as well, is where they're taking these places like, it's almost like in California there's 2 or 3 cities that should be their own state if you think about it, because LA, San Francisco, maybe San Diego, those 3 are so big and so concentrated that the majority of those people in those 3 cities make the decision for the whole state. So now they're trying to draw these districts where those are included in these rural areas with the farmers and the people who don't make as much as the people in those centralized locations, and they're deciding for the rest of the state that that's what happens. And you have to think of that on a big picture, on a big scale, because now California has this big amount of pull in whatever it is, and they're driving you to make the decision based on what they think.
Yeah, we've gone through gerrymandering is the term that's used. We've gone through this redistricting multiple times with a Democratic, a Republican and a Democratic bias. It's going both ways. And yeah, when you look at the way these lines are drawn, it's pretty odd, right? In other words, you got like a county, and then you pick up a little bit of the city. And it's the same thing in Nevada, for example. I was studying a district out there that basically had most of the state of Nevada, because there's really nothing in most of the state of Nevada. And then they took the very top of Las Vegas.
You're good. I'm here. Keep going.
Okay, good. Very top of Las Vegas. And that made up the district. So you had basically farmers and people out in the middle of nowhere, along with people who are kind of in inner city, and both are there in the same group. And do they feel like their representation is the way it should be? Well, that top part of Las Vegas dominated, right, that voting pool. So those people in those rural counties, got city representation, whether they liked it or not.
Yeah, and that's the tough part. Sorry, I was working through something. I'm trying to decide if something's doing something to our audio. But yeah, I mean, it's just tough, because I think that you have to really, like we've talked about, multiple times, is you have to reach outside the box. You have to realize that it's not just what you see. You have to do your own research and keep building towards that and trying to figure out what's going on, not what one place says. And if you watch the mainstream media, I suggest you go to both places, and when I say both places, it's like, I guess what it really is it's Fox News and everything else, right? And even Fox News doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, and that's why I say go everywhere else. But that seems to be the one right now that's the pushing towards the right, and then everything else is towards the left.
Yeah, it's media is very siloed, meaning they have their little part of the constituency or opinion that they're trying to represent, and I don't think that's what, and it sure was not when I grew up. You basically, media was trying to deliver something along the line of facts. There was a 2-car wreck on Jones Avenue. That was pretty much it. And there was literally 2 cars, and there was a wreck on Jones Avenue. So what did you have? The facts.
Yeah, you knew.
Now, you could have said, right, you could have said one guy was driving too fast and started inserting all of the things, opinion as in, they should change the speed limit on that road, or they could start getting into the opinion side, or you could just say there was a 2-car accident on Jones Road.
Yeah. It was funny because I was listening to Adam Carolla again the other day, and he was talking about crime in the country. And I kind of wanted to ask you about this. What do you think about the fact that, and this might be something that you look into in your research, because I think that we see more because everyone has one of these, right? and everyone gets to see what's going on social media because there's people. The other day, my friend Jay sent me a video from TikTok where there was a gal outside filming an arrest from ICE. These people they arrested some illegal aliens, and she's just talking, blah, 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 just going off about them arresting them. And we wouldn't have known that was happening had she not had a phone and had not been able to record that. But there's a different side to that where everything gets recorded, but no one knows where that person walked upon that, right? They just see this part where these people are getting arrested. They don't know what these people did to get arrested. It's just, well, this is an ICE raid, right? I don't necessarily know that ICE is driving down the road looking for people in a vehicle. It's very possible, but like, you caught this part. Now talk about the rest of it. Where's the rest of the story? What's going on? You know, it's like I got pulled over for speeding, right? But you just see the lights. You don't know what I got pulled over. You could see me. You could be driving down the road. You could see my truck pulled over. You could see me in it, and you could say, "Oh, I bet he got arrested for a DUI," not even knowing who I am, when I could have just been going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit.
Right. The context is so important in these situations where you're trying to understand the totality of the situation. And I remember going back to my old fraternity house, and put this in context for you. And it was interesting because I met the president, and this was probably, I don't know, 10 years ago. And he said, "What class were you from?" And I explained, and he went, "Oh, wow, that's so cool." And I said, "Well, what do you mean that's so cool?" And he said, "No, you guys are legends." And I said, "Well, I don't know that you would want to call us legends." And he goes, No, you guys are really legends." He said, "You don't understand." He said, "We can't do the stuff you did. There are phones everywhere. The stuff you pulled off would have been recorded and put on TikTok or wherever." He said, "That kind of stuff." And then he recounted 3 or 4 things that he had heard that we had done. And I said, "Well, yeah, those are true." He said, "We couldn't do that. You can't hold a toga party, right, and do the shenanigans you guys were doing, and because everything would be seen." And I looked at that and I said, that really is interesting about how he grew up and the world he grew up in and what you could and couldn't do. And can you imagine all of your slips and mistakes and your bad choices recorded for posterity? Yeah. Oh my God.
It's something that I think about every single day. We had this epiphany with my daughter yesterday that I just was like, I was blown away because we were sitting there talking about Thanksgiving's come up, right? So we got some family members coming over, and we were talking about certain family members and this and that. And one of them doesn't really like me very much, but they don't really know me. It was like, you've spent a total of probably 3 or 4 hours with me in your life, and you've made this decision of who I am. I think you and I have talked about this before, but we're talking about like what's coming up. This is going to happen. And my daughter looks over at my wife and says, "You know what? If she doesn't like him, she doesn't even know him. She's barely spent any time with him, blah, 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 blah." Like the same exact thing that I would say verbatim. And I'm sitting there thinking about all these arguments we have with his daughters. And she goes, "Why doesn't he like you?" And I said, "Well, it's because I hold you and your brother to a high standard." And she went off. She's like, "I am so happy that you hold us to a high standard because it makes us be better than who we are. And it may not be fun to have to listen to you talk to us that way, but you're trying to just make us better. That's what you're trying to do." And like, I just was like, I stuck my hand on her forehead. I'm like, "Are you okay? Like, do you have a fever?" Because the interactions and the conversations we have with you are never like, it doesn't feel that way. We always feel like we're not doing the right thing, and parenting is tough, and it's hard because you know in your mind that this is the right thing, but you don't know if you're doing the right thing, right? Like you always are in doubt of what you're doing. And I was just like, I was blown away because she really is taking in the things that I am giving her, and she understands them. She goes, "I know I don't always follow that, but it's just, I'm so grateful that I have 2 parents who care about my grades, who care about what I wear, who care about who I am." Because there's so many people that she goes to school with who their parents don't care. They allow them to cuss at the teacher. They allow them to do all these, and the cussing's a minor thing, but like they allow them to do all these things that kids should not be doing because they just don't care.
It was funny. Our pastor yesterday addressed his parents who were in the audience. His parents live out of town, and he said, I just wanted to acknowledge my parents are in town for Thanksgiving and an opportunity to spend some time with them. He said, and I just want you to let you know that, I hit the parent lottery. I got the two, and he was effusive for just a few seconds about them. And you could tell he was choked up. He said, the reason that I'm up here, the reason that I can do this and that was because I grew up with amazing parents who gave me the room to be myself, but gave me the boundaries, right, to perform and to be successful and to not make mistakes that were irreversible. And I had told some friends that I had two rules with my kids growing up, that you couldn't make a life and you couldn't take a life, okay? And that if we could just do that and make sure we stayed in those boundaries, okay, everything else was recoverable, okay? We could literally work ourselves back from anything, but literally, if you make a life before 18, wow, okay, now that's going to change your life for the rest of your life. And if you take a life, that's going to change your life for the rest of your life. So let's try not to do that, those two things before 18. And that way we get you off to the best start we possibly can. Now, obviously people think that's incredibly simple, but it's not. That's not that simple. And if you do that kind of evolution with your kids where you keep the rules kind of simple, like my kids always knew, respectful of adults, always. Just be respectful. Listen, they may be completely off base, but go yes, sir, and yes, ma'am.
Yep.
That's it. You don't have to listen to them. I didn't tell you to listen to them. I just said be respectful, right? And those kind of things will save you for the rest of your life, because those are the kind of things that really sink in and make a difference. Because again, people can tell you untruths and suggest you do things. Just be respectful. Be kind.
Yeah. That's a great line. I almost want to get just a sign that says that and tell my kids, like, all right, think about this before you answer your mouth. Open your mouth. Is it respectful? Like, is it something that is respectful? Can what you say be taken as respectful? Because if you can do that, then you won't say the things that you need to say. It's like when you're in the presence of an adult. The adult is the person who is you're supposed to look up to. They're supposed to know that they're the ones who have the guidance for you. So you should treat them with respect because they've been through it. And if you can do that, no matter what, like if you disagree with what they're saying, that's great. Challenge it. Don't challenge it to them, though.
Yeah.
Challenge it in your mind. Think about it. Take from that, just like anything else. I learned that this is what I don't want to do because I don't like it. Thank you for teaching me that,
Yeah, and in that respect goes over to like your partner in marriage and your partner in a relationship. Listen, here's the thing. If you treat something disrespectful, if you treat a person disrespectfully, this is your partner. If you say a crass or things, you can't take back words. You can apologize till the cows come home.
Right.
You trust me, you can't. But the reality is, pick your words back to being respectful, right? You are madder than a hornet at your partner. You're just hot. Here's the point. Just don't say crap you can't take back.
Yep.
Okay? You can be mad, but do not say things you can't take back. Be respectful.
Yep.
Because you can come back from being married. From being married and angry. You can come back from that.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great, very easy scenario that we don't, taking care of those small things will take care of the big things. So, Well, Robert, thanks for hanging out. I really hope that everyone has a great Thanksgiving. This is Thanksgiving week that this is dropping. When you're around your family and things like that, just like Robert was just talking about, make sure that you can kind of be respectful and don't say things that you can take back. If you have thought process that you should say something, think about it twice, because at this point in time you may ruin the whole thing for everyone. And we don't want to do that. We want to be able to have a good time of fellowship and hang out with our family and enjoy some good food. So there you go.
Absolutely. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
All right. You guys all have a great day. Like I said, if you would like to support the show, please go to patreon.com/Wes Tankersley. You can also go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review, and make sure you are subscribed on YouTube. Until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.